So it's On the Sofa with Rouge, and this afternoon it's a great pleasure to have Stuart Byrne here from the Dyslexia Support Group. So I'm assuming, Stuart, well, first of all, welcome to my house, welcome to On the Sofa. Thank you for being here. Very interesting to do a podcast on dyslexia, because I'm sure there's a lot of people like me who don't really know what dyslexia is. So growing up, you go to school and there's always people in your class who are going to be maybe given extra time at the end of an exam because they're dyslexic. And I always thought it was to do with the letters the wrong way around, but actually reading about it just so that I had a little bit of background for today, I've realized that it's a whole load more. It's the way you perceive things and the way you interpret things. So tell us all about it. What is dyslexia?
Well, dyslexia officially is a learning disability, but nowadays we don't really use the word disability that much. I think most organizations are moving away from the word disability. The thing is that the word disability ensures that legally we get the assistance that we need, because under the Disability Act we're covered.
Yeah.
But but really it's not a disability as such.
No.
It can be disabling in certain areas, but a lot of the times it has also got some amazing gifts and strengths. So, and what I say is, dyslexia is in the same way is in a lot of things in today's society. We try to label things. So, I've got Crohn's, and Crohn's is a disease that you look at the symptoms and then you give it a name.
Yeah.
And dyslexia is similar in that way. It is a word that we use to describe a person, the way they deal with things, the way they think, the way they process, and basically it means that our brains process information differently.
So they're wired in a different way from everybody else.
And that's the important thing. It's a difference.
Yeah.
So it's not a disability. It's not someone with a dyslexic, someone who's not dyslexic has got a better brain or anything like that. It's just a difference, and those differences come with some things that are difficult and some things that are positive.
What is difficult? I mean, what would be difficult for somebody who is dyslexic?
So dyslexics have a number of things: directionality, sequencing. Those are the areas that they struggle with, and that has a knock-on effect. So,
what is sequencing?
Yeah,
what do you mean?
Yeah, it's good. Good question.
Quite a technical.
Yeah, so sequencing is anything that's in sequence, really. So, like a word is in order; it's in a sequence.
Yes.
And so dyslexics struggle with that. They can struggle also with the pronunciation of words. Yeah. It's not a hearing and it's not a visual thing. It's the way the brain perceives and processes information.
I can only imagine, like, it's the brain sending the message, like, to your body. Because I remember as a thing, I broke my leg and my brain was like, move, stand up, and I couldn't. Yeah. And I was thinking, this is when I first broke it. I was thinking, well, I'm telling it to do something and it's not doing it. So I suppose it's a bit like that.
Well, I think it's more that we use different parts of the brain, especially, like, for example, when we're reading. They've done brain scans of a dyslexic person when they read and a non-dyslexic, and they see that our brain, we use different areas of the brain to a non-dyslexic. So that shows that we are normally a lot more creative. We think outside the box, and these are the positive things that are strengths. But it also means that we take a little bit longer to process the information. We take a little bit longer to read, which also means that when we're deciphering words, when we're reading, it takes us a bit longer and it's a bit more difficult. And that means also that our comprehension can also be, affected.
Right.
Yeah. So you'll find dyslexic will maybe take a little bit longer to read, and maybe take a little bit. You may have to read the same paragraph a couple of times to really comprehend it properly.
So tell me something. Let's go right back. So you are brought up in Gib. You're one of three, and you've got a big family. So, or rather, when did you realize that you were dyslexic, and how did this affect you growing up?
So yeah, I mean, dyslexia is really hereditary. So if one of your
Okay.
parents have dyslexia, you have a 50% chance of having dyslexia. So there's dyslexia in I think both my mum and my dad's sides, even though my dad's from the UK, and it's quite fun.
Both of them have
Yes,
dyslexia in the family.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think a lot of it's undiagnosed.
Yes.
But there's, you can tell by asking the right questions and knowing dyslexia well enough. And my wife is originally from Norwich. Her father as well. There's dyslexia on her side. So both my kids are dyslexic.
Okay.
And dyslexic, and yeah. So it's rife. If like I said,
it's genetic.
Yeah, it is genetic. So, I was chatting with my mum a bit about this yesterday, to try and re-jog my memory a bit from when I was little, because a lot of this stuff about how my mum found out I was dyslexic and my parents, was their story to some extent. But in St. Mary's, my mum, like you said, now, I'm the youngest of three.
Yeah.
So that was helpful for my mother and my father, because they had something to gauge on, and they noticed early on that, and one of the teachers was very good friends with my mom as well, and said, look, he's very intelligent, but he's struggling with things that doesn't make sense, it shouldn't be struggling with. And that's normally how dyslexia is discovered. Parents normally say, well, wait a second, the famous one is he can talk about life on Mars, but he can't write a simple word or read very well. So it's normally that difference between their verbal skills and their knowledge and perceived intelligence when talking, and how that doesn't add up to the way they read, write, and spell. Normally, that's how it comes out.
So when you're a young boy in school and all your peers are like getting on with it and sailing through, and you're struggling with your learning, how does that affect you as a young lad in school?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky because my mom and dad were very supportive.
Yeah, and they noticed it.
And they noticed very early as well.
They were aware of it. So that,
I mean,
yeah.
I was diagnosed when I was 8.
Okay. So that's still, I mean, quite a late age, because you start reading at about 4, you start learning your words. So.
Yeah, I mean, like my son, I think we diagnosed him, 4 or 5.
Yeah, of course. Because you were really aware of it. I mean,
course,
now.
Very aware of it and looking out for the signs straight away.
Of course.
But also, dyslexics often can mask their difficulties, especially when they're young. They use memory and stuff, and they can get through, middle school. More or less, it's when the work starts getting more complicated, more difficult, especially when it comes to like spellings, for example. I can't remember exactly the stats, but I think in first school you have to memorize 1,000 words, something like that. And most dyslexics can manage to do that by memory. But once you pass that, and you go into middle school, you need to learn thousands of words, and you can't do that by memory alone. And that's when dyslexics start really struggling, especially with spellings and the times tables are a nightmare as well, and things like that. Where there's sequencing, where there's memory issues as well. So that is a quite common areas that you will see.
Yeah, and how do you when you're young and you're going through this and you know what it is and you have, but how do you deal with it? Like, does it cause you stress when you're young?
Well, I think that if you don't know, it can be very stressful.
More stressful, of course.
And I think that's why I've always had this argument with education psychologists. Some have not liked to label. And I've always said, look, if you can give the help that the child needs without labeling, that's fine. But as a dyslexic, being able to use that term to, almost excuse sometimes my misspelling or whatever, it's very useful. So, like with any diagnosis, I mean, it's not an illness, it's not a disease. You can't catch and you can't lose it,
Yeah.
But it is like a disease in that sense that once you know what you have, it's really, really helpful. And I think for me, I was lucky, like I said, young. 8 is not that young, but it's young for a lot of kids with dyslexia. They don't get diagnosed normally that early.
And young to get help, not Yeah.
And for me, I don't really remember not being dyslexic. So it's difficult. But hearing stories, speaking to other people, speaking to people who have found out they're dyslexic in their as adults and stuff, it can be. You imagine, you're struggling through things. I mean, I think of somebody who I knew who was a year ahead of me in school. A clever guy. And he struggled with his times table. Imagine being told you're stupid, you're lazy, you haven't studied when you've studied more than any of your peers, and you still can't get it right. It's
very traumatic.
Yeah, very traumatic, and there's a high percentage, of depression and stuff like that. And this is why it's so important that we get it early.
That's going to be one of my questions about mental health. But I want to ask you, what for you, for example, what worked well and what didn't? And well, let's start there. What worked? What helped?
I think having supportive parents was really good.
What about the teachers? What about the education system?
Well, education.
There's a bit of beef there, no? I can sense.
The education system is not made for dyslexics. It's not.
Even now, with all the...
No, for sure, it's not made for dyslexics. And this is what we tell everybody, We say, if instead of trying to teach a dyslexic in the way that's best for them, we just say, teach the whole class in the way that a dyslexic learns, because it's beneficial for everybody. Dyslexics learn multisensory. And it's quite funny. Today I was at work, we had the radio on and a song came up and my colleague was like, oh, doesn't that remind you of football? It was one of the theme songs. And I say, it's true, music, memories come back with music. And this is what needs to be done for dyslexics. If you're going to talk about an apple, don't just write apple on a piece of paper. Bring an apple. Let me feel it. Let me take a bite out of it. Let me taste it. All that memories, all those sensors help me to remember things. So that is something that classes can do and teachers can do that benefits everybody. It doesn't just benefit dyslexics. So that's just one little pointer. But if schools were teaching as if every child was dyslexic, it would be beneficial for all. The problem
would it slow things down though?
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so. The thing is, slow things down. If you look at what has to be done to try and get a lot of kids to catch up.
It's all relative.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, but I mean, look, private schools do these kind of things. There's dyslexic private schools and things, and they seem to do it. And I know that there are teachers out there who do these things, so it can be done. It's just few and far between, maybe not as much as we like. The system, the actual education system, and this is not Gibraltar, this is because we follow the UK education system, is slightly limiting to teachers. It can be, a bit of a, hands tied behind your back situation. But I think within that, a lot of teachers, a lot of creative teachers, a lot of teachers who really love their profession find ways to make it work. So if they can do it, it can be done.
Have you tried to change the system, or have you had discussions with the Department of Education?
Well, like I said, we follow the UK system.
Yeah.
So, I've spoken to the British Dyslexia Association and Made by Dyslexia were the two charities that we liaise with the most. And I said, look, these are things that you guys need to fight for, because we are not going to change the UK government. The UK government changes, then, we will follow suit. But there are things that we can do here that don't need that change. Like I've just said, there are teachers who are doing it, who are implementing things in their classroom, irrespective of the system.
I was going to ask you, sorry to interrupt, but does the SENCO teacher have something to do with a child who is dyslexic?
Well, yeah, the SENCO should be dealing with children with SEN or special education needs. They don't necessarily directly deal with them, but they can do at times, and at times they're supporting the teacher. And that's one of the things that we pushed, and we asked for SENCO in every school
here in Gib.
And that's something that was pushed through a couple of years ago, and
that does exist now.
As far as I know, we are, that's something we asked for, and Dr. Cortez pushed that through when he was education minister, and that's really good. The thing is that we need to make sure that not just that we have a Senko, but the Senko has the resources, the tools, the time
Absolutely.
to actually do the job, which is what we are always trying to make sure, and get feedback from Senkos, get feedback from teachers, and go back to the education department and say, look, this is what we're hearing, because sometimes what the education department hears and what we hear can be slightly different,
things,
and
are there different levels of dyslexia? Are there people who are more...
Yeah, so what we would say is severity.
Yes.
So you have varying severities, and also obviously the intelligence of the actual person. So if you've got somebody who's highly intelligent and got mild dyslexia, maybe they'll get through schooling and won't notice until they're in uni, or maybe never get diagnosed. But then you have someone who's, average intelligence and severely dyslexic, and they struggle a lot more. So it's, and within that, there's a lot of variation with the symptoms and how it manifests itself in each individual.
So as a charity, what is your main aim, and what is it that you do?
Well, I always say my main aim is to get rid of the dyslexia support group. That Gibraltar...
To get rid of it?
Yeah. That Gibraltar is a place where dyslexics feel comfortable and they don't need a support group. So that the schools are dealing with dyslexia in a way that we're not necessary. Obviously we're happy here to support parents and stuff, but if Gibraltar is dyslexia friendly, then hopefully there'll be a less need for us. But
so you're like a pressure group putting...
Well, we've always fought against being a pressure group. We're a support group. So we're here to support parents, to support children, support adults who are dyslexic, and support the education department and the government to make things better for dyslexics. And in that, there is a bit of pressure but we're not a pressure group, we're a support group. We're here to work alongside the education department and the government, and anyone else who, and businesses and anyone else who sees that, and obviously educate and awareness. Awareness is a big part of it.
You deal with businesses as well who employ people who are dyslexic.
Yeah, I mean, we're just a small charity.
It's interesting. Very interesting.
A lot of work, and a lot of our focus is trying to get children diagnosed as soon as possible, recognized as soon as possible. Like we said before, if we're dealing with people, adults, they've already been through school, they've already been demoralized, maybe had depression and stuff like that. So we do a lot of our focus work in children, but we're there to support adults as well. We get calls from businesses, we get calls from employees, and we get people wanting to be assessed as adults. So we do that as well.
Do you think in GIB there is inclusivity of people who are dyslexic?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's difficult to tell. I worked for the GFSB for 4.5 years, and I've and worked to try and spread the word, but it is difficult, and it is a difficult one because I think that even though awareness is better, it's still not at a point where, I don't think, maybe some businesses are like this, but do businesses think, I want to employ a dyslexic? And that is where we should be, or where we hope to be, where businesses think, I want to employ a dyslexic. A dyslexic at the moment, if they fill in an application form, they may think twice about putting if they're dyslexic down on an application form. Now that shouldn't be the case.
Of course not. No.
But
But that is the reality.
I've been looking for a job in the last 6 months, and I thought twice about it. I thought, well, is this going to be looked upon? Oh, I don't want a dyslexic in my...
What did you do?
Well, I can't remember. It depends on which ones I did. I think, most people know I'm dyslexic. It's, it's not like I hide it.
Yeah.
But I see that it's a strength in a lot of ways, and I try to, point out those strengths as well. But it is something that I think if businesses... realize the benefit of having dyslexic in their team, then they want them. I think I was looking up stats the other day, and I think it's NASA employ 50% of dyslexics because they recognize the skill set that dyslexics have, and GCHQ as well. They also employ a lot of dyslexics.
I mean, it's really education, isn't it? Because I had no idea.
Yeah.
At all. So I'm really glad we're doing this because it's very important to get this message out. So really, it's perceived as a difficulty, but it shouldn't be. And you're trying to, in fact, Eric, I had this conversation with Eric Robotham the other day, because he said, I'm disabled, but yet look at all the things I can do. So rather than focusing on the negative, think of all the possibilities there are around that one thing. So I guess you see it in the same way. Unlock your global business potential with Octopus International Business Services Limited in Gibraltar. Are you looking to expand your business horizons and tap into international markets? Look no further than Octopus International Business Services Limited, your trusted partner for seamless global business solutions. At Octopus, we understand the complexities and challenges of conducting business on a global scale. With our extensive experience and in-depth knowledge of the Gibraltar markets, we offer a comprehensive suite of services designed to support your international business ventures. Our team of seasoned professionals is committed to providing tailored solutions that cater to your unique business needs. Whether you're a small startup or a large multinational corporation, our range of services includes company formation, legal and compliance support, accounting and bookkeeping, and much, much more. Please contact us on 200 77 779 or through our website octopus.gi. You can contact us also on Facebook, Twitter or LinkedIn. Octopus International Business Services Limited, regulated by the Gibraltar Financial Services Commission. You said it can cause a bit of depression, especially with young people who are struggling. Right? Is it prevalent? Are there quite a lot of people who are going through?
Well, it's difficult. I mean, I think that there is some. It's difficult to know sometimes. There is some studies that say that it is a knock-on effect, and some say that it is part of dyslexia. And it is a bit difficult to tell. Is it the circumstances of your struggling that your self-esteem is affected, or is it part and parcel of it? And it's difficult to tell. I mean, like I said before, I was very lucky because my parents were very supportive, and they always, like, if I got a report from school and my effort was an A, even though maybe my attainment wasn't an A, they would be very supportive and very, very happy. And those kind of little things help a long way, not punishing me when they know that I've worked my socks off to learn my timetable and I still don't know them. Things like that really help a great deal. But it's difficult to tell. And I think that it's just trying to find the root of things. If you're depressed, why are you depressed? I always tell this story. I had a conversation with a guy, must have been 35, 36, something like that. A really nice guy, really calm, really gentle, not very talkative. And I started talking to him about school. I started talking to him about Bayside. His face changed. He's a dyslexic, obviously. His face changed. He got really aggressive and really... because you could tell his memories were coming back of the struggles, the horror, the trauma he had gone through in school, and he changed. And I was like, whoa! And I had to change the conversation to a certain extent. But I often tell teachers, look, your job is really important. You have a really big power over children. Be careful what you say. Be careful how you say things. If you call a child stupid or lazy and things like that, it could stay for them for the rest of their lives.
Is that still happening, Stuart?
Yeah, it still happens.
Is it really happening?
I mean, look, I don't...
Even nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, look, teachers are human beings, they get frustrated and stuff. But I do think the more we bring up the awareness and the understanding, it is very different when you get frustrated with somebody because you think they're not trying, to when you get frustrated with somebody because they're trying and they can't. Yeah. Your frustration is not the same. It is a big difference. And so and that is why when we go back to the label, for example, when I'm struggling with my spelling, if I can say, look, I'm dyslexic, and the person who's involved or around, he's dyslexic. So it's not it's not maybe a little bit above it, but that's not what we want. We want understanding that, look, this is an area that we struggle with. It's talking about Eric, getting into a building is he wouldn't be disabled if there's a ramp. You know, it's not him that's disabled. It's
exactly
the
right.
facilities. You know,
yes, exactly.
And that's
right.
what I say about dyslexia. You know, if the schools, like we said before, teach dyslexics and everybody else the same way, you know, they will succeed even with rewriting and spelling. Maybe not amazing, but they will be able to do it at a really good level.
I was reading on the website My Dyslexia. What did you say?
Made by Dyslexia.
Made by Dyslexia. I had a quick look at it, and it said something about dyslexic thinking. There's a whole thing about it. What does it mean?
So, Made by Dyslexia, they've partnered with Microsoft and with Virgin. Obviously, Richard Branson being dyslexic, and and they've come up with this. It's on LinkedIn, so you can put it as a LinkedIn skill. It's dyslexia thinking, and basically it describes a little bit about how dyslexics thinks and how, you know, that is a positive thing that you may want in your workplace. You know, like I've said before, dyslexics are normally got very good out of the box thinking. They're very good problem solvers. Normally got very good spatial awareness. So very good at 3D thinking and thinking, you know, thinking out of the box and getting good ideas and figuring out how to resolve things. So all that kind of stuff. I mean, I can't remember exactly but if you go onto, I think it's dictionary.com, and you look up dyslexia thinking, it's there. And you go into LinkedIn, if you're dyslexic, you can go to skills and you can add it as a skill.
You can add it as a skill.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah,
That's turning it around completely.
Yeah, and this is what I think...
And it's about education. It's about telling people that you can do that and that it's a thing.
Yeah, I think that's Made by Dyslexia has been pushing that a lot. It's funny because we were doing that locally. I think, you know, I was 30 years ago, the Dyslexia Support Group was started in 1991. So, you know, we're talking over 30 years ago that Dyslexia Support Group in GIB started. And I think back then it was trying to get people understanding the difficulties that we have. But I think now, even though some people still don't understand the difficulties, but I think now it's trying to make people understand, yes, we have difficulties, but we also have strengths. And not to see, you know, like we said before, employing a dyslexic as a negative thing. We don't want you to employ us as a favor because you need to, you know, fulfill a quota.
Or feel sorry for you or something.
We want you to think, okay, I want a dyslexic on my team because they're going to bring things that, you know, and if I need to support them in the areas that they struggle with, okay, I support them. But they're going to bring things that I don't have in my team right now.
And do you think the private sector compared to the public sector, there's a difference between the people they employ? Like, do you think one of them ticks all the boxes, so we have to employ a dyslexic and we have to, or not? Is there disparity?
I don't know. It's a difficult question.
I mean, from working in the GFSP, did you come across situations?
I haven't really done, you know, any research in that regard. But what I would say is that I think 50% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic.
Wow.
You know, so entrepreneurship is you know, a big thing for dyslexics. So you will find that a lot of the small businesses in Gibraltar, a lot of them are probably, you know, opened or run by dyslexics, you know, because they're very creative, and a lot of them don't like to sit behind the desk, to be honest. They are, you know, they're a bit more active, they're a bit more creative, and they want to express themselves. So you find that they often, you know, set up their own businesses, or maybe they have a 9-to-5 job in the government, but they have another job on the side. You know, and that is very common until maybe that kind of really, you know, feed them, then they leave and they go for that because they're very creative, they're entrepreneurs. So you will find that probably there may be a disparity because they tend to like to have a bit more control, a bit more creativity, so they set up their own businesses.
And what is the percentage of people who are dyslexic?
So, you know, in the UK they say 5 to 10%.
Okay.
But I've seen in the States it can go up to 15%.
Gosh, yeah.
So they say 1 in 5 or 1 in 10. You know, it's a high percentage. I think in Gibraltar it's probably on the high side.
You think?
Yeah, because, you know, we're a small community. Yeah. It's very hereditary. So, you know, a small community like Gibraltar. The other thing, you know, I laugh at it, but you tend to, marry people who think like you, who are similar to you. So a dyslexic.
Is that what happened to you?
Well, my wife's never been diagnosed, but there's dyslexia in her family. So so the likelihood is that dyslexic marry another dyslexic. So
because you're looking at the same
you're looking
things that you get,
you think similarly, so obviously sometimes I'm not saying every dyslexic marries a non-dyslexic,
no.
So the likelihood of their children being dyslexic is even higher because both parents are dyslexic. So I think in Gib the percentage is probably quite high. 10% at least, maybe a bit more.
It's quite a lot.
Yeah, that's another thing that, we did obviously speak to the political parties about. We need stats. We really need stats in Gib because, it's very difficult to know how much support we need to give if we don't know how many people have dyslexia.
Tell me about the charity. How many are you in the charity working for, to enhance the services provided?
So we're a small support group charity. We have a committee, and we I think we're 6 in the committee.
Not that many.
Yeah.
So you're looking for people, Stuart?
Yeah, always looking for people. I mean, most of our committee work as well. So it's always difficult to do things, especially those things that need to be done during working hours. So please, anyone listening, please get in touch, because especially like either retired people or people who don't work, that's very helpful. But even if you do, get in touch. We're always looking for people. It is, at the end of the day, most of the people who get involved have dyslexic children or are dyslexic themselves. So, they have their struggles with their families as well. So, it is time consuming, and sometimes it can be stressful. And so it's always good to have fresh blood. I mean, it is very rewarding as well, obviously, and I've been doing it for 20 years on and off. Yeah. I had some health issues, so I took a year out, but it is very rewarding, and there's still work to be done. So
always,
I please get involved and get in touch.
That's my next question. This podcast is called Why Bother, right? I've spoken to a lot of people about why they bother to do things and what gives them, mostly it's that it gives them a lot of joy. That's why. But I would ask you. I mean, you've been through ups and downs. You said you've also got an illness that you deal with as well, as apart from everything else. So why do you bother?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I looked back. I think it was like 2003, 2004. My daughter was close to being born, and I was like, I feel that I need to give back to the community. I need to do something. I looked at some friends who, one was, giving guitar lessons and stuff. And I was like, God, I want to give back. I want to do something. And I don't have anything. I don't have any skills, I can't play a guitar or anything. I just bumped into a friend, and he told me about somebody who had been diagnosed at 14 years old. And I was horrified. I hadn't been involved with the dyslexia support group, ever really, because when I was a kid, it was my mum who was doing it. So, and I couldn't believe that was still going on. I was like, nah. So I said, well, I'll get involved with that. Something I can help out. I know a little bit about dyslexia.
Of course.
Being a dyslexic, what I found out is that the dyslexia support group wasn't running anymore at that time. So I had to get it going again. I was hoping to just join in the committee, but in the end, I had to start it myself, basically all over again. So at the time, I didn't have my son. My daughter was just about being born. I didn't know if any of them were going to be dyslexic. I just wanted to give back. And I still want to. I just want to help those who are less fortunate, those who don't have a voice. Those that,
need support.
Yeah. A lot of times parents don't know or understand.
Oh, maybe parents are in denial. You get that quite a lot as well.
Yeah, you get that as well. And some of them are dyslexic themselves, and they've managed, and they think, you can get through. And you go, wait a second. It's not about getting through.
No, it's about thriving.
Yeah, it's about doing the best you can, And sometimes, that's happened with my kids. It's like the school says, but they're okay. But they're okay. but they could do much better. They're cleverer. You've given them the support. They, instead of being getting, average, they could be getting above average, or if they're getting above average, they could be getting excellent.
So apart from changing the way things are taught in Gib, what would you change?
That's a good question.
Perceptions, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's a great deal of our work is awareness and perception. I talk about dyslexia, and people say, "Oh, talk to me about dyslexia for 5-10 minutes." I'm like, that's not enough time to talk about dyslexia. When most people think about reading, writing, and spelling, but there's so many other things that are involved. The way that the brain processes information affects loads of different things, and sometimes, a lot of the times, dyslexia overlaps with other similar disabilities. Like 40% of people with ADHD have dyslexia also, and there's dyscalculia and there's dyspraxia and autism and stuff. So a lot of these things have overlaps. Have overlaps. So some of the times you think, a lot of the times people think about dyslexia and they think, well, if you're not reading, writing, and spelling, it doesn't affect you, and it does. And there's so many different areas. And, I remember I was playing a game with my brother and sister once, and my kids were born. So I must have been, 26, 27, something like that, not a kid. And we're playing a game, and my brother and sister, they're amazing. And they've always been really understanding with my dyslexia and stuff. And we're playing a game, and I felt like a child. I felt really inside of me, like I felt like throwing the board, kind of thing that you do when you're a kid and you can't cope. And I just got up and I left, and I was like, why am I feeling like this? I didn't understand what was going on, and I started thinking about it and started praying. I was like, God, why am I getting so worked up? Why am I struggling with this game? And the game was sequencing numbers with colors and stuff, and I'm like,
the hardest thing,
of course, this is Ian Seema, my brother and sister. Okay, they love games and they love making games more difficult. So a game that is normally without a timer, they add a timer and they put you under more pressure.
So you couldn't cope with it.
I couldn't cope with it.
Of course.
And I came back and I sat my whole family down and I said, look, you may think I was childish leaving the room, and I felt like a child, but I couldn't cope. And the reason I couldn't cope was this game is difficult for me on normal day. As soon as you added the time element, it was too much for me, and it's funny, as a family who, has grown up with dyslexia, who kind of understands it more than most, my brother and sister still needed that to be explained.
They're obviously not dyslexic.
Well, as far as we know, I don't think neither of them have ever been tested. But it's those things that, they still times when the terminology, I don't like it when my dyslexia affects me. It's who I am, it's not something. It's part of who I am, and sometimes, I struggle with something or another, and I can understand, I can put it down to my dyslexia. I can see that it's a symptom of that, some common ones, like I'm struggling right now. Retrieving words is very common. So you often get dyslexic people who say, "Come the thing from the thing."
See,
it's a very common.
Actually, I do that.
Yeah, it's very common. Retrieving.
I do that. I've never thought I could be dyslexic, but I do that.
Retrieving words can be very, very difficult.
We talk about testing. How do you get tested? What would be like a question you would ask that would give you an indication?
So there's two things. There's the official test, which needs to be done by an education psychologist to get the official diagnosis. Then you can have tests done by other professionals like Jessica Byrne, who's trained from the Dyslexia Support Group. And even Senkos can do tests. They're not official diagnosis for like GCSEs and stuff like that, but enough to start being supporting. But what I do normally with parents that call us or get in touch with us is, ask simple questions. First, is there dyslexia in the family, as it's really hereditary? If they know of dyslexia in the family, well, then that's already an alarm bell. Some of them don't know. There's never been anyone diagnosed with dyslexia in the family, but there still may be dyslexia in the family. So I ask questions like, do you have any entrepreneurs in your family? Do you have any uncles, aunties who maybe did very badly at school but have gone on to become really business-minded, or even maybe done a degree in their 30s or 40s, which is very common for dyslexics as well. Things like that. Ask those kind of questions.
So
actually, or do any of your family, write really badly, or they're spelling really bad, considering they own a business? Oh yeah, actually. So it's those little things that you can start, saying, okay, maybe dyslexia is in the family, even though you've never had anyone diagnosed. And then start saying, okay, well, one of the things that I struggled with was tying my shoelaces, which is very common. Dyslexics struggle with directionality, so they struggle with telling the left from their right. They struggle from, tying their laces. They struggle with all those like sequencing, directionality, all those kind of things they struggle with. So tying shoelaces has got all that. Things like finding a dominant hand when writing. So if your child is a bit ambidextrous, where most of the kids in the class have picked their dominant hand, they're still not chosen a dominant hand. Things like that as well.
Lots of things.
Yeah, delayed speech. Sometimes glue ear and problems with their ears. I don't know why that is, but it is common. So I ask those kind of questions. Are they very creative? Normally dyslexics are very creative. Normally they go into some kind of art form. It's early on, they're very creative and thinking out the box. And then the issues with, like we said before, if you talk to them and you can tell that they're not stupid, that they're clever, and then they're struggling with things that for their perceived intelligence they shouldn't be struggling with. So all those kind of things are the kind of things I talk to parents about and start gauging.
Yeah.
If it's dyslexia or not.
How can people because we've been chatting for quite a while. It doesn't seem like it because I could carry on so many things to ask. But how can people get in touch with you? And if they feel they have a child maybe or they're struggling, what can they do?
So my telephone number is everywhere, So
if not, just ask me. I can put you through.
Yeah, for sure. We're on Jib Yellow, we're on Facebook and YouTube, we're everywhere. On Twitter, and we just set up an Instagram account as well. So we're on all the mediums you can. I mean, if it's during working hours, please, just send me a WhatsApp, and I can call you after work. If not, just send us an email or get us on Facebook or whatever. We've got all the platforms we can.
So, Stuart, we've had the Dyslexia Awareness Week, which was last week, and we wore red for dyslexia on Friday. So what else is happening?
So next week we've got our AGM.
What day is that?
So that's Thursday at the John McIntosh Hall at 6 p.m.
Okay.
So, if you want to come find out what we've been up to, what we're going to do, and also if you want to get involved, we really encourage people to come along. If you want to get involved, try and get in touch beforehand so we can have a little chat. But the AGM on Thursday at 6 o'clock at the John McIntosh Hall.
Well, thank you, Stuart. It's been a real pleasure. One last question that I ask all my guests, would have to ask you. So if you were stuck on a desert island and you could only be with one person, who would it be with and why?
My wife Hazel, for sure. I love her to bits, and we just went for lunch yesterday, and it was great. It was lovely. I love her to bits, and I would love to spend every time I can with her.
That's so romantic. Very sweet. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you, Stuart, for telling us all about dyslexia. And of course, I hope lots of people get in touch and hear this, and we can help other people.
Yes, thanks.